Hello everyone. Today let us discuss about the poem The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Let's move on to the poem. Before we start the poem, let us think about the following questions. How do you think the choices you make today can shape your future? Can you recall a time when you had to choose between two paths? How did you make your decision? What factors do you consider most important when making difficult decisions? These questions will help you to understand the poem in a better way. Now let's move on to the introduction of poem. The Road Not Taken. The Road Not Taken is a narrative poem by Robert Frost, first published in the August 1915 issue of the Atlantic Monthly and later published as the first poem in 1960 poetry collection Mountain in Travel. Now let us check your understanding with the choose the correct answer. The first question is, when did Robert Frost written the poem Road Not Taken? The options are 1910, 1899, 1910, 1915. So let us see the answer. The answer is 1915. Robert Lee Frost. Robert Lee Frost was an American poet known for his realistic depiction of rural life and his command of American colloquial speech. Frost frequently wrote about setting from rural life in New England in the early 20th century, using them to examine complex social and philosophical themes. Now let us check your understanding about the poet. The second question is, Robert Frost was a dash poet. The options are African, American, Australian, Indian. So the answer is American. Let's move on to the next part. Stanza 1. The two roads diverged in the yellow hood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveller, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to whether it bent in the underground. So the summary. The poet, while traveling on foot in woods, reaches a junction where two roads diverge. Immediately he realized that as a traveler, traveling both the roads is impossible. Here two roads are meant two ways of life. The woods are yellow, which means it is probably false and leaves are turning yellow. So let's see the question number 3. What does the yellow hood means? Falling leaves, forest with yellow leaves in autumn season, hood yellow in color, none. So the answer is forest with yellow leaves in autumn season. Let's move on to the second stanza. The second stanza is, then took the other as just as fair and making perhaps the better climb, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that the passing there and had warned them really about the same. Now the summary. The poet kept on looking at one part for a long time to check if it is the right part for him or not. And then he decided and started walking on another path because he felt that both paths are equally good. He says just as fair, so he felt that both paths were equally good and started walking on one of them. Let us check your understanding. So the question number 4, what does grassy means in the poem? The road which is not taken by anyone, the comfortable road, the road with luxury, well built road. The answer is the road which is not used by anyone. Let us move on to the third stanza. And both that morning equally lay in leaves, no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day, yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. Now let's see the summary of the third stanza. The poet says that both the paths were similar that morning. Both had leaves on them and no one had stepped on them. As they were still green in color, he decided that day he would take one part and keep the other part for another day. Although he knew that one way leads on to the another way. Question number 5. For what did the traveler keep the first road for another day? To travel, to cross, to measure, to show others. Let's see the answer. The answer is to travel. Stanza number 4. I shall be telling this with a sign. Somewhere, ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a hood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that as difference made all the difference. Let's see the summary of the fourth stanza. He says in the future he will take a deep breath and says that once upon a time he had travelled such a point in his life that there were two options for him, and he travelled on that road which had been travelled upon by less number of people. So let's see the question number 6. What does diverge mean? To be separate and take a different turn, to be torn, to broke, all. Let's see the answer. To be separated and taking a different turn. Let's see the rhyming scheme of the poem. The road not taken follows a A-B rhyme scheme. Symbolism. The road is a representation for the journey or the life choice that the poet makes. It is the one of the poetic device used by the author or the poet in the poem. Let's see the next slide. Metaphor. In this poem, the road is a metaphor where we make choice in our life. The word undergrowth stands for the future into which the poet cannot see. Simile. Both the roads have been compared to each other using the words as, just, as, fair. Repetition. The word ages has been repeated twice in the second line in stanza 4. The line two roads diverging has been repeated in stanza 1 and 2. The word way has been repeated twice in stanza 3. So let us see the art dictions. Diverged. I have given the phonetics also. So the meaning of diverged is separate and took a different direction. So repeat after me. Diverged. Diverged. Let's move on to the next slide. Undergrowth. Repeat after me. Undergrowth. Dense growth of the plants and bushes is the meaning of undergrowth. Wanted where. Wanted where. Repeat after me. Wanted where. Its meaning is had not been used. Had not been used. Let's move on to the next slide. Hence. Repeat after me. Hence. The meaning is year in the future. The meaning is year in the future. So, the moral values from this poem: be careful when making decisions. The poet the poem speaker stands at a fork in the road and must choose which path to take, and the poem suggests that the choices we make shape our future. It is important to be wise and careful when making decisions and to avoid regrets. So, next, most important moral value we learn from this poem is trust your instinct. Since we cannot know what the future holds, we should trust our instinct and hope for the best. Let's move on to the next slide. So, I have given a quiz link so you can test your understanding about the poem from this quiz. Let's move on to the next slide. I have given the reference link from where I took the poem. You can refer this link and also read further. Thank you.